specially calendared meeting to assist in our management of workload. I'd like to ask for patience as we continue to conduct virtual meetings. There may be slight delays as we transition between speakers, presentations, and participants. If any participants have issues with the technology, please send a message to the moderator, Ray. We have 3 discussion items on our agenda today. 2 items are listed under old business and have received staff and applicant presentations and have received public comment previously. 1 item is listed under new business where we will hear full staff and applicant presentations. I would ask the commissioners to hold all questions until the conclusion of all presentations and any public comments. Finally, please be recognized by the chairperson before speaking. We start every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on any item not contained on the agenda. No one has signed up for public comment today. Moving on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a list of requests that can be acted upon in one motion. There are 3 items on the consent agenda today. Item Z721 has been deemed inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map, and therefore would be referred to the committee of the whole. The remaining 2 items appear on the consent agenda to begin the review period. Each of these items will return on a future agenda to be discussed fully. With that, I would ask for a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda. Commissioner Lampman.
I move to approve the items on the consent agenda.
Excellent. We have a motion on the table, and Commissioner Mann.
Second.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. I will now ask Chinitha for a roll call of the votes. Oh, it's not a final vote, so actually we can do this with a show of hands to support the motion. All those in support of approving a consent? The motion passes unanimously. On to committee report. There is a committee report listed on the agenda today. However, the committee of the whole reviewed 2 cases on March 25th, and 1 was held in committee and the other was referred to our April 13th Planning Commission meeting, which it will be discussed at that time. Vice Chair Winters, Chair Committee of the Whole, do you have any additional comment?
No.
No. Excellent. So moving on, before we move on to old business, I'd like to make a change to the order of the agenda. I understand that the applicants for Z6520 have some scheduling conflicts, so I'd ask that we discuss that item first today. Without objection, I would ask that we begin with new business. Okay.
Oh, Chair Fox, could I ask a question?
Sure.
Real quick. We received an email from Francis Salima regarding case Z5720, requesting for a continuance of that case because neighbors were not given the TIA report updates in a timely manner. Has that been considered?
Actually, we can consider that when we get to that old business item. That's a good point of conversation.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Are we all okay moving forward with the new business item first? That's the NC State case. Okay. Item F.1, case number Z6520. This is a request to rezone approximately 975 acres of land on Centennial Campus, bounded by Avon Ferry Road and Lake Wheeler Road, from a number of different zoning districts to Campus District. The request includes a master plan that establishes the development areas, sets regulations, and provides context for development. I'd like to ask for a staff presentation from John Anagnost.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. This is Z-65-20 for the Centennial Campus of North Carolina State University. It is a request to apply the Campus District, where currently there are a number of different districts, but primarily office mixed use with heights of 3 and 5 stories. Slide, please. So here you can see the general area in the zoning. And so the character in this area is basically to the south and the west is largely residential in both zoning and existing development. And then to the north is a bit of a mix between a little bit higher density residential and some commercial uses. And to the east is another state property called Spring Hill, followed by Dix Park, which will, as you know, be a City of Raleigh park. Next slide, please. And here you can see that with the aerial view, the campus itself is more developed in its north end, where many of the academic buildings are. There also are residential buildings in the northern part of the campus. And in the southern part is the Lonnie Pool Golf Course, the middle school, the chancellor's residence, and the alumni center. So a little bit lower intensity development in the southern portion of the campus. And then in the center there, you can see Lake Raleigh, which connects to Walnut Creek and the Walnut Creek Greenway Trail. Next slide, please. Here's a little closer view. This is available if we want to take a closer look later for reference. Next slide, please. These are the entrances of the campus. I have several images of the campus, and we'll go through these pretty quickly. But you can see the entrances are fairly low profile and somewhat ceremonial. Next slide, please. And then in the interior of the campus, these images show the north end, where most of the academic activity is taking place. And you can see the general similarity of design across buildings in the campus. Next slide, please. Farther south from the academic portion of the campus is more residential and lifestyle aspects. There is a fairly new hotel just north of Main Campus Drive, south of Lake Raleigh, called the State View Hotel, as well as a townhouse neighborhood called North Shore on the north side of Lake Raleigh. Next slide, please. And I have this slide just to let you see the exit along Centennial Parkway that faces the Spring Hill property to the east. And so this would be a primary access point between Centennial Campus and Dix Park and Spring Hill when those properties are developed in the future. Next slide, please. And then this is directly west of the campus. And so this is north of Trailwood Drive, in between Trailwood and the campus. There is multifamily housing. This is along Chapel Drive, directly west of the North Shore townhouses. Next slide, please. So in terms of what the university is requesting, there is a campus master plan, which is similar to a planned development district master plan, in that it provides sub-districts or tracts in which the applicant can specify particular development types and allowances. In this case, the main function of those sub-districts is to set the maximum height, which you can see here. This is height in stories. There is not a maximum height in feet that's connected with these height designations, but you can see at the southern portion of the campus, a similar height limit to the current OX zoning. And then in the northern portion of the campus, more height towards the center at 7 stories. And at the far northern end, near Centennial Parkway, where there currently is the highest density and active uses, there is the tallest height, which includes an allowed height of up to 28 stories at the northeast portion of Oval Drive. Next slide, please. So the campus master plan has some modifications from what would typically be required by a mixed-use district in the city of Raleigh. And I want to pause on that for a little bit because the state, as the property owner and as the user, is a little bit unique in that sense. And there's a couple of reasons for that you can see here. Number one, subdivision requirements in the sense of dividing land and applying infrastructure into the division of parcels is something that the state is legally exempt from by state law. So the city is not able to apply those rules. And the state can essentially say that they can set whatever parcel boundaries that they would like and setbacks and so forth. I also want to draw your attention to point 3 on this slide. The city of Raleigh has a permit through the state to release surface stormwater runoff into local waterways that we must treat or require to be treated as part of private development. The state does not have to use the city's permit because it has its own permit for releasing stormwater runoff into local waterways. Therefore, the city will not be in a role of regulating their stormwater runoff. And so that's something that will not be part of this master plan. But there are a couple of other things that the state has requested exemption from or relief from that the city could regulate, and that's points 2, 4, and 5 here. So the requirements for public streets and connectivity that are in the city zoning code, the state has requested to be exempted from. and then dimensional standards for buildings. And one of the key aspects of that is that building types in our mixed-use districts have requirements of maximum blank wall areas and minimum transparency. And what that is doing is requiring the face of the building to be of visual interest to a pedestrian or passerby, which makes the street more welcoming and comfortable. And then number 5, they're not requiring height in feet for the lower height designations, which the city does. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit more about blank wall and transparency that's required. This is something that the city could regulate, and that the university could submit development plans to show compliance with these rules. And there are policies that you'll see in a moment that are rendered inconsistent by the lack of adherence to these requirements for maximum blank wall area and minimum transparency of buildings. Next slide. The master plan also includes required transportation improvements around the edges of the campus in response to the additional development that will be allowed by this rezoning. And those are based on the traffic impact analysis that they performed and which has been accepted by Raleigh Department of Transportation. And so in the sense of the things that the state is able to control in the surrounding transportation network, they have offered a number of reasonable mitigations to the increased traffic. I think it's important to note that there are some environmental constraints that prevent them from adding access points in certain locations around the campus. And so in the areas where they have that ability, they have committed to providing additional connections as well as additional lanes and sidewalk and bicycle improvements over time that are triggered by certain amounts of development on the campus property. Next slide, please. And so you can see those. It's difficult to read that there. This is also in your backup materials. But like I said, it's additional connections in the street network, and then existing streets will be built out further. Next slide, please. So in terms of the amount of development that would be allowed by the proposed zoning, the increase is a little over 1 million new square feet that would be allowed. So you can see towards the bottom of this table, the 12.6 million or so square feet that's allowed today. That would go up to 13.8 million square feet. And it's also useful to note that currently there's about 4.7 million square feet of development existing within Centennial campus. So basically between what's there now and what could be built total, that's about 9 million square feet. Next slide, please. This university operates its own bus service, the Wolf Line, which you can see 5 routes that serve Centennial campus, 3 which enter the campus and 2 which pass on Avon Ferry. And then Go Raleigh also has 2 routes on Avon Ferry. And so the northern end of the campus is well served by transit. Next slide, please. Here you can see the future land use map, which is institutional. Institutional is the future land use map designation for large public and organizational facilities, of which this is one. And the recommended zoning district for the institutional designation is campus. So this request is fully consistent with the future land use map. Next slide, please. The urban form map here has a parkway corridor along Interstate 40, which is served by the campus master plan due to its pretty restrictive allowances for development in the southern portion of the campus. The amount of development that will be allowed in the location of the existing Lonnie Pool Golf Course is similar to the existing clubhouse for the golf course. So there's not actually much additional development that the university is entitling themselves to by this request along Interstate 40. So that's a strong indication that area would remain largely a recreational area or open space area due to the extreme lack of development that's still held there. And then the northern end of the campus, where we see the highest density and tallest heights requested, is where we have the transit emphasis corridor on Oval Drive in the center of the academic portion of the campus. And so that is also supported by the urban form map in the sense that the university is providing transit service and providing active uses with high densities in the areas with transit service. Next slide, please. And so based on those analyses, the request is consistent with the future land use map and the urban core map, as well as the comprehensive plan. Next slide. Many of the consistent policies have to do with the extensive open space and recreational amenities that are currently in place on the campus, in which the master plan would maintain and retain in the future. Next slide, please. And so that makes a strong consistency with the comprehensive plan. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, there are some inconsistent policies which are largely related to the university's request to not have the dimensional requirements for building types apply, particularly the maximum blank wall area and minimum transparency for buildings. Next slide. And so at this time, there's no issues with the structure of the request. It is accepted by staff, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Anagnost. Next, we will hear from the applicant. Jamie Schwadler is here on behalf of the applicant. The applicant and those in support have 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chair Fox and members of the commission. I'm Jamie Schwadler with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant, NC State University. The request before you is different from any other request you've seen because it's the first request to use the UDO's CMP district and because it seeks a translation of the existing entitlements into a new format. Next slide, please. To understand why we are seeking this translation, it is helpful to review our history. Centennial Campus was zoned in 1988 to enable educational, research, and public-private partnership activities, as well as residential and recreation uses, all according to a master plan covering roughly the same area you see on the screen in orange. In 2013, the city adopted the UDO and created the new CMP district. In fact, Centennial was one of the large-scale campuses in mind for this type of district when the code was written. But while several universities explored this district, no one has sought this type of zoning until now. Like the prior entitlements, this request also has a master plan which breaks the campus into various districts, but it does so according to the new requirements under the UDO. Next slide, please. As noted in the staff report, the request is consistent with many policies of the comprehensive plan. These speak to partnering with the universities, promoting their economic stability, and coordinating institutional growth to position our universities for the tech sector and the future in ways that are different from a large private landowner. Next slide, please. NC State has worked with the city on this request for some time and has undergone considerable outreach to ensure our neighbors understand it. University representatives have met individually with nearby neighborhoods and interested groups and created a zoning-specific website that has received over 990 visits. We provided the commission a summary of that engagement by separate memo, and I'm happy to go into more detail in questions following the presentation. But at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Alicia Knight.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Jamie, and good morning. My name is Alicia Knight, and I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for Real Estate and Development at NC State University. The rezoning request before you today, first and foremost, is rooted in NC State's continuous pursuit of excellence in teaching, research, and public-private partnerships on Centennial Campus. Additional goals of the rezoning include modernizing the zoning to align with the current UDO, outlining a thoughtful framework that accommodates our long-term development of both university and partnership activities while maintaining quality open spaces and recreational areas, facilitating a 21st century vision of a learn, live, work, play environment that is a part of a vibrant campus and innovation ecosystem. Finally, creating clarity and certainty, both for the university and all constituents surrounding the permissions and obligations associated with future campus development. Next slide. The foundation of this rezoning is a master plan framework that divides the campus into 9 districts, which then have assigned development parameters. In identifying these districts, we considered several key criteria: the natural features of the campus and how development maintains and supports those characteristics, edge conditions, our borders, our neighbors, and the geography, existing development patterns, areas of future activity, and the development that we envision in the future. I'd now like to spend a few moments walking through the framework of the districts. Next slide. District A is shown in this purple-blue color on your screen. It has an existing combination of university and private public partnership uses. It's an area of campus that has fairly concentrated development. It's an area where we envision a continued mix of uses and an active built environment. This district would have a maximum height of 12 stories, and we've included a neighborhood transition zone along the western boundary in recognition of the adjacent residential uses. Next slide. District B, shown in orange on the screen, this is the area at the northeast of our campus. It's the site of NC State's envisioned North Oval Innovation District project, which is contemplated as a premier destination for university and industry collaboration. The area is ideally located at the intersection of District A activities that I described and north of the main academic oval in District D, which we'll talk about. The area presents a tremendous opportunity for a more urban, learn, live, work, play environment and the convergence of academia and industry in alignment with our mission. It's the area of Centennial that we envision could have the tallest buildings with a maximum height of 28 stories. Next slide. District C is the Serpentine District that runs along Centennial Parkway, and it's shown in purple on this screen. It's an area characterized by natural features on the east and an easement to Duke for power lines along much of the area. We see it as an opportunity in the future to enhance the permeability to Centennial Parkway and the Centennial East, Spring Hill, and Dix Park areas in the future. While we envision limited development opportunities, given the constraints, where development does occur, we would be looking at a maximum height of 7 stories. Next slide. District D is shown in pink and purple at the center of the graphic. It is that quintessential academic oval, and it's home to our Hunt Library, as well as the Wolf Ridge Apartments and other academic activities. It features that central oval green, and it's an area where we envision the character to largely remain consistent. We're again looking for a maximum height of 7 stories in this district. Next slide. District E is this yellow district that hugs the eastern areas of Lake Raleigh. It has existing residential and hospitality uses that take advantage of their proximity to the lake and that unique environment. There are also extensive greenway trails and recreational elements. We envision future development would also take advantage of adjacency to these amenities. We've also included a neighborhood transition zone in this district along the north and the west. And additionally, in response to conversations with some North Shore residents, which is located, it's a residential development located just north of the lake, we've added a special open area to this zone where District E meets District A to provide for a buffer between potentially more dense uses to the north. This is again a district where we're looking for 7 stories of height. Next slide. District F is the green district that is Lake Raleigh and Lake Raleigh Woods. Lake Raleigh Woods has been designated as a hallowed place on NC State's campus due to its tremendous natural elements and value. The only development we might anticipate would be potential support elements such as an outdoor classroom pavilion or a restroom or something like that. As such, we're requesting a maximum height of 3 stories, which is the base of the CMP district. There is also a neighborhood transition zone incorporated into this district. Next slide. District G is shown in orange, and it's at the southwest of the campus. This district is the location of the Centennial Campus Magnet Middle School and the Friday Center. It's an area that we envision might accommodate a variety of future academic, residential, or private partnership uses in the future. This district also incorporates that neighborhood transition, and we're requesting a maximum height in this area of 5 stories. Next slide. District H is shown in blue and is the area of Lonnie Pool Golf Course. It's an operating golf course located at the south of the campus, just north of I-40. It's largely undeveloped green space given its use, and we envision a continuation of that use. Future development in this district is limited and capped at 3 stories. Next slide. Our final district is District I. These 2 areas south of I-40 are part of NC State's campus, but were bifurcated during the construction of that interstate. NC State doesn't have any specific plans for development in this area at the moment. As such, we have rezoned with an assigned maximum height of 3 stories in the district in consideration of those neighborhood adjacent uses. We've also incorporated neighborhood transition zones and have assigned limited permitted uses in this district of university and residential only. Next slide. As I said previously, the framework was established with specific consideration of natural characteristics of Centennial Campus, and the balance of the built environment with open and areas is a critical part of this framework. As such, the plan does include 233 areas of open spaces, approximately 25% of the campus. And that calculation does not include the golf course, which land area makes up about another 21%. NC State also has an established tree conservation plan that was previously approved by the city's urban forestry department, and we would continue that plan under this rezoning. Next slide. We also wanted to touch on stormwater management in today's presentation. The context of stormwater in this rezoning, as John mentioned, is different than a traditional urban infill project, and NC State has an existing multifaceted approach to stormwater management on our campuses. NC State is considered its own municipality for stormwater management purposes and manages a municipal storm sewer system permit separate from the city's. We have staff in environmental health and safety who are tasked with this responsibility and an advisory group that meets regularly to administer the permit and address any issues that arise. We also have stormwater management guidelines in our physical master plan that apply design principles and stormwater practices to new development. We have a demonstrated commitment to maintaining open space and natural areas on our campus, which we know allow nature to process stormwater management in many areas. Our sustainability plan includes stormwater management strategies. And finally, we've deployed multiple low impact design and restorative projects on our campus, including some that are shown here in this graphic. Next slide. I'll turn it over to Richard Adams.
I see that we're out of time. If we could just have another minute to finish up the presentation with respect to mobility.
By show of hands, who is comfortable with allowing the applicant an additional 2 minutes? Okay. Please move forward, Ms. Schwedler.
Thank you. Richard Adams.
Great. Thank y'all. Again, Richard Adams with Kimley Horn, 421 Fayetteville Street. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about mobility and infrastructure, and specifically wanted to talk a little bit about the existing mobility and infrastructure that is already provided as part of Centennial Campus. We're starting from a good place here. Significant infrastructure and service has already been implemented as a result of previous zoning approvals. This includes everything from Centennial Parkway itself, a large network of on-campus streets, and things like the Pullen Road extension, roundabout, and connection over to Oval Drive. As was mentioned previously, there's expansive Wolf Line service, which is very frequent, free bus service provided to students, faculty, and the general public. Very high ridership, almost 3 times the ridership of Go Triangle, just to give you an example. And again, free and open to the public, as well as the Go Raleigh routes that are provided nearby. Greenways and trails are provided across the campus. Many folks use that from outside the campus community as well. Everything from the Centennial Bikeway Connector, the Walnut Creek Greenway, and a north-south greenway provided on campus. Again, as part of the rezoning itself, a significant traffic study, TIA, was done as a part of the rezoning, working closely with city staff, and really looked not just at traffic, but an entire mobility suite. Some specifics, intersection improvements were recommended at several intersections that are shown with the red stars here. New street connections were recommended. That was mentioned previously as well, shown in yellow, where we can fit them in. And then a large number of multimodal improvements, including bike lanes and sidewalks, protected bike lanes and sidewalks on Varsity Drive, connecting over to main campus. And then on main campus drive, a multi-use path is recommended, along with some additional connections for multi-use connections to the north, again, connecting further towards the existing campuses. Next slide, please. And then just to give you an example of what some of these recommendations are like, just showing some protected bike lanes. I'm sure some of y'all are familiar with that, but real excited about going with that. And then the multi-use path as well that we're recommending along main campus drive. And then next slide, please. And then I'd like to turn it back over to Jamie with the remaining time.
If we could just leave it on the last slide, please. Just in sum, this is simply a complicated translation of an existing master plan into the new UDO format, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission has at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Schwedler. I'm going to move on to speakers from the public, as this is the first time we've heard this case. We're going to allow those in opposition 10 minutes to speak. Mr. Moderator, can you unmute the first speaker?
I have Adam Helsell.
Hi, this is Adam. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Hi, my name is Adam Helsell. Obviously a local resident, grew up in the area. Been an NC Stater for life. All of my brothers have gone there. My stepfather worked there. So big NC State person. Happy that I could get involved in this public discussion. The main reason I'm in opposition of this is being a through and through NC State person. This feels like the university is trying to get out of the academic arena and into the real estate arena. And throughout this process, I've asked the university how these improvements are related to supporting academia or public-private partnerships, how this will benefit the students, the university as a whole. There has been no set plan addressed, particularly areas like Section B, the Innovation District. It's a high density mixed use, I believe is the term. So there's not been any designation as to will this be, 27 stories of residential and 1 story of commercial on the ground floor, or will there be lab spaces, or what will be planned there that specifically makes this an innovation district? So just concerning for someone like me who's been involved with the university for several decades, that this appears more to the public, or at least in my eye, to be a plan for the university to divest into the real estate market instead of worrying primarily about academia. So those are my concerns as a member of the public and someone who still stays heavily involved with NC State, not simply by going to football games, but for instance, I sponsor interns. I have a senior design group with the College of Engineering, and I mentor an academic club in my spare time as well. So I spend a lot of time focusing on the academics of North Carolina State University, and a project like this is just concerning to me that they may be not focusing on the stated purpose of these lands, which was, granted to them by Governor Hunt many decades ago, and I wouldn't think that this was his vision for it to have high density mixed use. I'm very much for the public-private partnerships. I was a part of the technology incubator on Centennial campus for several years, so I know that it can work, and I know that there is some development that is needed. But again, the way that this development is being presented concerns me. So those are my 2 cents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Helsell. I would now like to allow for question and comments from commissioners. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Commissioner Winters?
Thank you. This is more so a comment specifically to Mr. Helsell. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I just wanted to thank you for your comments today and how much you love your university. It's rare that we hear feedback like that and how you continue to give to your university, and it's very personal to you. So I just wanted to say that to you. So thank you so much for your time.
Seeing no other questions, I would like to ask of the applicant if they had any commentary or if they could answer the question about the original designation of Centennial and what was allowed and permitted.
Yes, this is Jamie Schwedler. I'll start with that and then we'll turn it over to Alicia. And we very much appreciate Mr. Helsel's comments as well. We've been speaking with him throughout the process, and he's participated in, I think, all 4 of our neighborhood meetings or 3 of our neighborhood meetings. So we've enjoyed that, that dialogue. And I think what's different about this zoning is that you're translating what was allowed under that 1988 master plan, which did allow many of the same uses, combinations of density, and open space and areas that we're seeking today. But we're translating it from the old code. So what might seem like a massive development is really just translating what we're allowed to do today from the existing build out into what the UDO recognizes. So it's not meant to deviate from that original mission. It's meant to really just see what the old code called certain uses and the combination of uses, and see what that would be treated like under the UDO today, because it's more of a master planning looking toward the future and the next 20 years. So it's really more of a framework than a specific development plan. There is no master development plan saying there is going to be a 27-story residential building. There's just translating what the old code allowed us to do with those uses into what the new code would call those uses and how they would treat those uses. Alicia, I don't know if you'd like to add anything else about the original intent from Governor Hunt.
Yeah, this is Alicia Knight. I'd just like to address more of the mission element of that question, which is, you know, the chancellor opened each of our neighborhood meetings and I think outlined his vision for the continuation of the tremendous work that has occurred on Centennial Campus. And this is not a change of direction for the Centennial Campus. The campus has evolved over the past 30 years as a combination of teaching and research and public-private partnerships. And, you know, we talk about the importance of bringing academia and industry together to solve the problems of the next generation. And I think the way that that vision is articulated is intrinsically linked to the mission of Centennial Campus, the mission of the university, and the land that was allocated for Centennial Campus at the time, and the additional allocations. So I think we view the density and the vision of a potentially more urban environment as one where you create a critical mass of people that can come together in these convergences and collisions around great ideas. And that's the vision here. It's not about zoning. It's really about how we set a framework that we can then make plans internally to answer a lot of the questions that Mr. Helsel has outlined. You know, what kind of buildings? What are the research that's going to go here? And that's a future step for us.
Are there any additional questions? Commissioner Rains.
Thanks, Chair Fox. Question for the applicant, or maybe John as well. Under the inconsistent policies, UD 2.3 and LU 7.6, activating the street and pedestrian-friendly development, I was wondering if there's any opportunities that the applicant could offer or the commission could discuss to kind of address those, because I think this site has a lot of opportunities to have those policies implemented. So I just want some thoughts from the applicant or the commission members on those 2 items.
This is Jamie Schwedler. I'll be happy to answer, I think, for the team. And then, of course, if John would like to say anything, I can turn it over to him. But one of the things that makes this request so different is that you have state-owned land and a process that's different for state-owned buildings, that's just very unique and different from the way this would all transpire if everything was private development. And what we're trying to do with this zoning is streamline all of that so that 10, 15 years from now, someone can sit down and pick up the UDO and understand what applies and what doesn't, in a way that's much more efficient for both the city and the and NC State as they make their future plans. And one of the things that can complicate that is that, you know, I guess the meat of the pedestrian inconsistency comment here is just what exactly those buildings will look like on the ground floor and what those requirements will be. And as a university, when we're planning, 15, 20 years in the future, 15, 20 years ago, the lab space looked very different than it does today. And what folks would want those ground floor interaction spaces to look like could be very, very different. And so the intent in the zoning is to try to create enough flexibility that lets NC State be who it is, an innovative university that attracts the highest educational and institutional and research activities that it can. So from a zoning perspective, we'd like that flexibility. However, I think there's many examples on the campus. The Jim Hunt Library is a great one, where we have done very innovative architecture and elements, and where those combinations, living in that kind of free, innovative environment, have produced some great results. But we want to try to keep that creativity and innovation within the area of what that future user could be, not necessarily prescribed exactly scripted what the code would require. And that's the intent of requesting those.
This is John. In terms of what the applicant could potentially offer or change about the master plan, the campus district does give the applicant the ability to build their own district almost from scratch. And so they have the menu of all the standards that are in the dimensional standards for building types, and the applicant can pick and choose which of those they'd like to apply and which they'd like to be exempted from. In this case, they requested to be exempted from all of them, but they could specify some selection of those. And they could also specify that they only apply to particular sub-districts at the campus or to buildings of a certain size or height. That there's any number of ways that they can require those standards, but in a limited or targeted way.
I saw Mr. Bauer's hand up, if you'd like to make a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of background. As was noted, the campus district was added to the UDO as a special purpose district that was distinct from planned development. And it was designed to respond to the particular needs of large institutional users. And the types of things we had in mind were college and university campuses and hospitals and things of that nature. And so one of the reasons why there's the opportunity for a lot of flexibility is that a lot of these large institutions have very special purpose buildings. A hospital, for example, has all sorts of extremely particular building needs that may not line up with the typical urban form prescriptions of our zoning. NC State, I was a student there myself in the 80s. There's a nuclear reactor on the old part of the campus. It probably is not going to meet the normal transparency requirements. And so, part of the guiding ethic of the campus at the time it was added to the code was the idea that we would pay more attention to what was happening at the edge of the campus and allow the institution to make major decisions about how to manage development in the interior of the campus where there wasn't the same obvious public purpose to it. Now, that doesn't mean we don't care and cannot enjoy, especially in a public university like NC State, the amenities that the campus provides. Even if you're not a student, you can go paddling at Lake Raleigh, you can go to the Hunt Library. But the part of the ethic was to provide some flexibility in development for these large institutional users. So that's not inconsistent with what the original intent of the district was. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you for that. I believe I saw Commissioner McIntosh's hand.
Yeah, thanks for those explanations. That helps me understand a little bit more. But I just want to echo Commissioner Rain's concern. It was jarring, to read about this, planned, future development on the Centennial campus. That, we've got this list of pedestrian-friendly policies that are not being followed, and it just doesn't sound right.
I have one question for the applicant to tag on to that. I do know that there are a series of policies and guidelines outside of this master plan for the development of buildings on the campus itself. Would it be possible to maybe identify some of those and bring those back to us?
This is Jamie Schwather. Absolutely. Part of, I think, what's so different about this request is there's many things that are already in place that kind of go to the intent of reflecting that pedestrian experience. And then we do have kind of internal policies for the future of how to meet those. So that sounds like a great way to kind of show how we are meeting that intent, even if it might not be in the typical way that you see it from the UDO. And I especially appreciate Mr. Bauer's comments because we've been discussing the option of the CMP district for a long time with the city. We very much appreciated all of their help in understanding kind of what this would mean. And one of the things that's a little bit different again about this case is that because it's state-owned property, the subdivision is not the same as you have with private land. The roads are not the same. So there's a lot of unique things about the interior of the campus that really focus more on the edge. And I think that's a really important point to focus on. But we'll absolutely gather information about the pedestrian experience, both on the edge and throughout, and in kind of policies to help better explain that.
Thank you. Unless any other commissioners have any other additional requests, I'd like to recommend that we hold this at the table to allow the applicant to come back with that additional information. Okay, seeing some head nods, I'm going to move on back to the old business portion of the agenda. We have 2 items listed under old business. These items have been previously discussed and we have received presentations and heard from the public. Each request was deferred to allow the applicant to consider revised zoning conditions to mitigate areas of inconsistency. For each item, I would ask for a short update from staff focusing on the revisions of the request. The first item is E.1, case number Z5720. This is a request to rezone approximately 1.25 acres of land at the southeast corner of Glenwood Avenue and Rembert Drive from residential 4 with neighborhood conservation overlay district to office mixed use 3 stories parking limited conditional use. This request was last presented and discussed on March 9th. We received a full presentation from staff and from the applicant. Additionally, we heard from members of the public. I do acknowledge Commissioner McIntosh did note an email that we received this morning. I would like to recommend that we move forward with the update from staff so we can focus on some of the changes to the request since March 9, and then we can decide whether or not to hold or defer the case during our discussion. Commissioner McIntosh.
Thank you, Chair Fox. I just wanted to clarify the email I was referring to was from Friday, March 26th. The same writer also sent an email this morning.
Great, thank you. All right, can we start off with the presentation from Hannah Recco?
Good morning. As was mentioned, case Z5720 was deferred at the March 9th meeting for some additional information. Since then, the applicant has provided an addendum to the traffic impact analysis and has also revised the zoning conditions. And there's also the information requested by the commission included as an attachment to the agenda materials. Next slide. So new since March 9th, there is 1 amended condition and 2 new conditions. Condition 4 was amended to lower the maximum building size to 12,500 square feet. That was previously 15,000 square feet. Next slide. And the 2 new conditions were added together. They identify 18 trees on the site that would be preserved. Condition 5 identifies 7 trees along the Glenwood frontage. And condition 6 identifies 11 trees along the Rembert frontage to be preserved. Next slide. And those 2 new conditions do reference an exhibit. You can see a small image of here. It's also included in the backup material. And it identifies which trees those are. They're highlighted in green and also numbered specifically. Next slide. So the new conditions do not change the build out for residential development. That is still limited by another zoning condition. Next slide. But the conditions would alter the maximum building size, and that's more likely to affect uses like daycare or office. Next slide. So the TIA addendum is included with the case materials. Sort of the highlights of that are that the addendum assumed the Rembert Glenwood westbound approach was one lane. It did find that approach operated at a level of service F in the PM peak, and a staff recommended a 200-foot westbound turn lane, which reduced that delay to match the no build scenario. Next slide. And then again, as a reminder, the change conditions did not affect the overall consistency of the request. It's consistent overall with the comprehensive plan and consistent with the future land use map designation of low density residential, and consistent with the urban form map designation of transit emphasis corridor along Glenwood Avenue. Next slide. And then again, as a reminder, the consistent policies with compact development, commercial impacts, transitions, compatibility and frontage. And then next slide, the inconsistent policies with future land use map and conservation of single family neighborhoods. So that sums up the staff presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. And as a reminder, the deadline for action is April 26th.
Thank you, Ms. Recco. The applicant has previously provided us a presentation, and we've heard from the public. If there's a desire to hear additional comment, we would need to vote to grant time for all opponents and proponents. Without objection, it looks like we have 3 speakers signed up, and if we do the standard 2 minutes per speaker on the second time hearing a case, I would like to grant each side an additional 6 minutes to provide an update. Okay, seeing some thumbs up and head nods, let's move forward. I'd like to ask for an update from Isabel Maddox on behalf of the applicant. Ms. Maddox, you have 6 minutes to provide an update.
Good morning. I'm Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box 946, here today with Jean and Dominic Wong, who are on the line. Also on the call are Stuart Rogers of Major Consulting, our civil engineer, and Chase Smith of Rainey Kemp, our traffic engineer. Just to remind you, our research has shown a strong need for daycare in this area. And if we go to Exhibit 1, you'll see that this area is a very intense area along Glenwood with apartments, office buildings, rooms to go, enterprise rental car, Jiffy Lube, restaurants. They're all zoned and used commercially along Glenwood. We believe the proposed daycare will be a good transitional use here. We have decreased the building size to 12,500 and have agreed to preserve 18 trees along Rembert and Glenwood. If you'll look at Exhibit 5, you'll see that we have trees along Glenwood to be preserved in green circles, green triangles along Rembert. The Rembert preservation is subject to a provision that if these trees are required to be removed in connection with any right-of-way improvements, we can do that because we don't know exactly what will happen there. As to the NCOD, first of all, that is a zoning designation, and just like other zoning designations, it may be changed as areas change and uses become more appropriate or less appropriate. It's not established in perpetuity. This lot is on a major 8-lane corridor, and we think it's appropriate for removal of NCOD. It's not appropriate for single-family development. We meet all NCOD requirements except the 50-foot setback from Glenwood, and that allows us to move the building closer to the street, which actually is a benefit to the neighborhood. So the only NCOD we don't comply with is one that benefits the neighborhood. You asked some questions about the prior rezoning case denied in 2017. We think we're very different from that case. That was a much more intense project, 3-story, multifamily, retail, and office permitted. This is a 1-story project. If you look at Exhibit C, you'll see our proposed building. That project proposed over 1,400 daily trips versus 532 here. Their building size was 32,500. Ours is 12,500. They could have had drive-throughs and weekend and nighttime activity. Our project will be quiet at night and on weekends. And that project was inconsistent with the comp plan and the urban form map. Next, I'd like to talk to traffic, which is the biggest issue, and refer to our traffic engineer, Chase Smith. Chase?
I'm Chase Smith. Am I on? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Chase Smith with Rainey Kemp Associates. We're the traffic engineer that completed the original TIA. After our meeting, or after the last Planning Commission meeting, we met with Ann Conlon of City Transportation, and she brought up several additional issues that she wanted us to address. I'm just going to walk through those real quick. That number one was how we analyze the intersection, analyze the approach of Rembert Drive, 1 lane versus a 2 lane approach. If you can go to Exhibit 11, please. Yes, thank you. These are pictures recently taken that provide evidence of actual practice of folks using the intersection and using that approach as a 2 lane approach, 2 lane stacking. Again, it shows that there's not a whole lot of, not a lot of stacking, but there is room for 2 cars to line up next to each other at the signal, approximately 2 to 3 cars back as well. But based on the comments from the previous meeting, we remodeled the intersection as a 1 lane approach and found somewhat similar results to the original TIA. Again, we were seeing some queues, maximum queues that could back beyond our side drive on occasion. Average queues weren't exceeding 205 feet, so they're not even reaching our side driveway on a typical time. Based on our analysis that we provided, City Transportation did come up with the conclusion that a 2 lane approach for Rembert would be a good idea, including an extension of any left turn storage to provide about 200 feet, which could include some widening for Rembert Drive. Although this is a site plan issue, we understand that the city's probably going to require it. And I think we're all in agreement that it would be a good idea to make those changes when it comes to the site plan phase. The second issue that was brought up was the review of multiple additional intersections in the area. I think we've found that the daycare traffic just doesn't generate enough traffic to warrant looking at other intersections. We're generating 66 entering and exiting cars in the morning, which is about 1 per minute. So that's going to have a negligible impact on the surrounding area once you break out all the different roadways that folks are taking. Number 3 was capacity of neighborhood streets based on some coordination with City Transportation and Conlon again. It was brought up that neighborhood streets such as Rembert have about a 3,000 vehicle per day capacity. With growth projections added, Rembert Drive is expected to have about 2,400 vehicles per day in our future 2022 year. That's without the daycare traffic. If we were to throw all of the daycare traffic into the neighborhood, which is about 500, I think 532, 562 vehicles per day, we would still be below that capacity. Number 4 was the impacts of the York Elementary expansion. If you can go to Exhibit 13, please. Awesome. You'll find that the TIA that was done for the York Elementary expansion was actually for a student capacity increase of 50 students, not the 200 that was originally brought up by some neighbors at the previous Planning Commission meeting. And this small amount of traffic was picked up by our background growth that we were assuming for our TIA for the daycare site. And you'll notice based on the bell schedules and the peak hours for the daycare that they don't even align. So the York Elementary expansion is not expected to play a huge part in what the daycare does as well.
I don't mean to cut you off, but your time is over. If you had one more sentence to complete, I'm going to allow you to go ahead and do so.
I was just going to throw it back to Isabel.
Can I just have one minute to conclude, Chair Fox?
I'm looking for some concurrence with members of the commission to allow some additional time. Seeing some thumbs up and head nods. Please move forward, Ms. Maddox.
Thank you. I just want to conclude that we believe this request is reasonable in the public interest because we think a daycare is a good transitional use. We think there's a strong need for high quality daycare in this area. We're overall consistent with the comp plan and urban form map. This property has been vacant for 5 years with no interest for single family development. And we comply with all NCOD requirements except for the one that we set back from Glenwood. For traffic, the intersections in the area are overall level of service C or better. We're only adding 66 trips per hour, which is about a little over 1 per minute. And we think traffic on Rembert is expected to clear every green light cycle. And we think the roads in Rembert Drive has additional capacity and will have sufficient capacity before and after the daycare. So thank you for your indulgence, and we're available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Maddox. Next, we will hear from members of the public. I would like to ask the moderator, Ray, to call the first members of the public.
All right, first to speak, we have Ashley Campbell.
Commissioner Fox and other members of the commission, thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Ashley Campbell, and I am a homeowner in Brookhaven, and along with David Weiss-Shadell, who you will hear from in just a few moments, I am leading the effort of more than 250 Brookhaven neighbors who oppose this rezoning effort. We first want to say thank you to those of you who met with us over the last 2 weeks, who took time away from family. Some of you were on vacation, to meet with us and talk with us about our concerns. We appreciate you making that opportunity to hear us, to ask questions, and give us an opportunity to address any questions that you had. And today we will try to do that in a larger forum. It has given us faith in this process and in the deliberate way in which you approach important decisions like these that impact the people who live in our neighborhood. Unfortunately, what's not given us faith and has in fact caused significant concerns are the applicant's efforts to withhold information from us about the revisions to the TIA. We specifically requested this information at the meeting the last time we were all together. Of course, that's on the record, and through our attorney, Mr. Essick. We did not receive the revisions until late last week when the agenda came out and when our attorney requested it again. By refusing to provide the information to us, and as you know, it was a 60-page addendum, the applicant has caused an unnecessary delay and did not allow us sufficient time to review the revisions with our counsel to prepare for the meeting today. As you know, Mr. Essick emailed you to tell you he was out of town this week for a previously scheduled family trip for spring break, and so we are here today without counsel. Despite that, we have done our best to prepare a response, and we appreciate you giving us an opportunity to do that. There are 2 things I want to mention that I hope you will keep at top of mind. Ms. Maddox began her presentation today by showing you a map of the Glenwood corridor and pointing out all of the commercial properties along the corridor. What is different about this proposed project from every other commercial project that she pointed out to you is that this project will enter and exit into a residential neighborhood. It is not the same as the other commercial properties along Glenwood Avenue. Additionally, I want to point out that, again, the TIA makes inaccurate assumptions about York. There is a 15-person additional capacity at the school. The school is currently at 150 students below capacity. Those of us who live in the community, I've served on the PTA for 2 years and was involved in all of the planning for the new school, know that the proposal is to push the capacity of the new school up to the high number. So those of us who live in the community, again, know this information, and we provided accurate information at the first meeting. I will now invite Danny Howell, who is a Brookhaven neighbor and project engineer, and who also spoke with you last time, to add some specific comments about the revisions to the TIA.
Good morning, this is Danny Howell. Again, I'm a site civil engineer with Real Engineering, and I live at 6109 Wilkinsburg Road in Brookhaven North. Good morning. Thanks for another opportunity to speak in opposition of the requested rezoning. I want to apologize for not having you an advance copy of our red lines and comments on the applicant's TIA amendment letter before our meeting today, but there's just wasn't enough time. I was not able to get through the 60-page plus document until this morning. Per Table 2, capacity analysis summary, the Rembert and Fairville Drive size of the intersection in all scenarios are still at a level of service E and F, which are failing with almost 2-minute time delays. This is said to be typical and acceptable for the TIA, but the nearly 25% increase in wait times are unacceptable to those using the already underperforming intersection on a daily basis. We appreciate city staff's recommendation to help with the queuing concerns, which was to construct a 200-foot westbound turn lane on Rembert Drive at Glenwood Avenue, as the TIA still has no recommended mitigation measures. We would ask that city transportation staff please elaborate, clarify, and confirm, are they requiring a combined 200-foot westbound left turn and through lane and a separate right turn lane only, or a dedicated left turn lane and combined through and right turn lane, as the recommendation in the city's letter only says a 200-foot westbound turn lane. It doesn't designate what type. Rembert Drive is a neighborhood street, City of Raleigh classified. A 2-foot right-of-way dedication along Rembert Drive is already required to provide half of a 64-foot public right-of-way, including half of a 36-foot back-to-back street section and 6-foot wide concrete sidewalk. Now add in additional near side widening of the intersection approach and street section to allow for the necessary 200-foot turn lane, and additional public right-of-way dedication will be required. One of the newly added conditions, which we just received as well, was to attempt to save some existing trees along Rembert Drive and Glenwood Avenue frontage, which is greatly appreciated. However, with the above improvements, it will be nearly impossible to save existing trees along Rembert Drive, identified in Exhibit A. We need to look hard at the wording of this condition, as there are some loose terms and flexibility, making it potentially another empty promise and condition. At the end of the day, in all scenarios discussed, potential daycare facility traffic leaving the site, 140 trips, AM, PM, and 600 vehicles per day will all have to exit on Rembert Drive, a neighborhood street. I will send our red lines and comments of the recently received TIA amendment letter following this meeting, and request that you all take the time to review our comments before making any decision on this project, which is why we requested continuance, along with additional time to review additional zoning conditions for their efficacy. For these reasons, among others, that will be discussed by other neighbors. If a decision is made today, we still respectfully ask the Commission to recommend denial of Z 5720. Thank you.
Looks like we're at time. Was there an additional speaker signed up?
There's one more, David Weisschedel.
Mr. Weisschedel, would you like a minute or so to give your comment?
Yeah, so I could just have like a minute and a half to 2 minutes. That would be great.
Okay, without anyone in opposition, I'm going to allow him the 2 minutes. Okay, seeing some thumbs up. Please move forward, Mr. Weisschedel.
Thank you. I just wanted to answer some of the questions that were raised by you all at our last meeting. First was the historic use of the property. It's always been a residence. It has never been commercially used, and people have always lived there. The owners at the time even voted for the NCD at the time it was put in place, and I'm happy to share title history with the commission if you need more detail. Also, the proposed condition changes to the rezoning don't really change anything on our side. They've limited the building size from 15,000 to 12,500, but the site plan only has a building size plan for 10,400. So the main concern we have, again, with removing the NCOD are the setbacks. The 50-foot setback along the front, which is being disregarded by the applicant, has the largest negative impact on the look and feel and the character that our neighborhood is known for when you drive down the street. And also the bare minimum transitional yards are extremely inadequate for the property buffers. I live right next to the property, and it's going to be 6 feet of transition. It's simply not enough. And overlooking that part of the NCOD is not a benefit to the neighbors. We don't want to stare at the monstrosity out of our front window. We don't want to live within a stone throw of a dumpster. And also, what happens when there are graduations or open houses at the site? Where will these cars park? There's not enough parking for these events, and they will end up parking in front of my house. They've added some trees in the conditions, but none of them are along the adjoining residence where I live. There's simply not adequate space on this site for a daycare. It's a square peg in a round hole. And regardless of any disagreements we might have on the TIA, the fact that just under 600 trips a day will be added to a neighborhood street cannot be changed. This daycare does not belong in a neighborhood, and this property is in the neighborhood, not next to it. As Ashley said, it should not be lumped in with the other Glenwood Avenue properties. Those all have exits on Glenwood. This property does not, and there's a huge difference. Commercial uses do not fit and would look and feel inconsistent to anyone who has seen this lot in person. We are generally disheartened, and we don't feel like our concerns are being heard and certainly not being addressed by the applicant. And we ask that you consider these arguments and recommend this rezoning be denied. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, sir. I'd now like to allow for question and comments from the commissioners. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Commissioner Miller.
I wanted to thank the applicant and the neighbors for their additional work on this project, and in particular on the new traffic study and analysis that was also performed by staff. I think this case at its heart comes down to policy LU 5.2, managing commercial development impacts, that states that new commercial development does not result in unreasonable and unexpected traffic impacts on the surrounding residential areas. Based on the TIA and staff's analysis at this time, staff provides, and based on the report that I see, I think I agree with the new TIA that says that it would not create an unreasonable impact on traffic impact on the surrounding residential areas. You know, that being said, Ms. Campbell and other neighbors made the good point that this new TIA was provided to the neighbors. I think she said on Friday, if that's the case, or at the end of the week, last week. And so they have not had the a lot of time to look at this and provide additional comment and analysis and to provide feedback and to us to look at that. So I given the deadline for this project is not until April 26th, I would be comfortable and would like the neighbors to have some additional time to review this new traffic analysis and to provide their feedback so that we can take that into account in analyzing whether it does in fact create an unreasonable traffic impact on the surrounding residential areas. In addition, the neighbors asked a good question about the turn lane. I believe that was a clarification for staff about the dual lane and what type of dual lane the staff was recommending in this area. Could staff answer that question?
This is Jason Myers with the City Department of Transportation. The left turn lane is kind of by definition in traffic engineering convention exclusive left, and then that would mean there'd be a through right next to it. The frontage improvements that would result in the ability to stripe that would allow the city to restripe that in a different way if it made sense. The analysis is that the way that it makes the most sense is with a through right and an exclusive left. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Miller?
I believe it does. There was a neighbor that had a specific question about that. Is he still on the line? And does that answer his question?
This is Danny Howell with Real Engineering again. It does answer the question. Thank you. It does clarify. And again, I thought it was going to be actually the other way, where they were going to do a left and a through and then a dedicated right, I guess, just to keep that, at least help with the queuing of free flowing the right turns that are allowed to go when the light is red. So I'm not sure which of those ways is better. Again, we'll have to coordinate with obviously the traffic consultants. But again, I just worry that not allowing that almost free flow right turn, then you won't be getting some of those cars and queues out of the way, because there are a good bit of cars that are turning right and can go through. They mentioned it's currently operating sometimes with 2 lanes now, but if the first car that pulls up to the light doesn't pull all the way over to the left, there's no way for cars to turn right at all when the light is red. So it's again, I would like some more clarification on that, or to look into a little bit further for them and myself on if that's the correct, and it very well may be the best way, the way they're proposing, but it's not the recommendation didn't read whether it was a left turn or through, and I just wanted clarification of that. So thank you for that. And we'll look into that a little further as well.
Thank you very much. And a question for staff. If providing this dual lane with this additional information is going to help mitigate the traffic impacts in this area, could you explain if this could be included as a condition to the project, and if not, why that is?
Are you asking if this is Jason Myers again, are you asking if the left turn lane could be included as a condition?
yes, I understand that this might be included as part of the site plan process, and just wanted, I think I understand, but for the sake of everyone and the neighbors on the line as well, clarifying why, or
Yes.
whether this could be included as a condition of the project.
My understanding is it could be included as a condition. I don't know that it is an especially onerous condition because they have a requirement already for a tier 3 site plan here to widen Rembert wide enough that we could stripe it that way. And the actual paint to stripe it isn't necessarily a big expense or difficulty, and it's something we would usually require through site plan. But usually required through site plan is not necessarily as certain as a condition requiring it. So it is definitely possible to include that as a condition. I would recommend specifying it being either through left or through right, because as the citizen mentioned, there are different ways of looking at that, and it could be a little bit additional work would be appropriate to do so.
Gotcha. Is there any issue with including a condition on an off-site improvement?
I don't think any of this would be an off-site improvement, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the question.
I was thinking that perhaps, and I could be wrong about this, it's a question for staff. Can a zoning case include a condition about an off-site improvement, such as a change to the street that is not part of the parcel?
It can. This is David York. It can, because the only conditions that are allowed in a rezoning are those that are voluntarily offered by the applicant and agreed to by the applicant. This is not like a development approval that could be made with accompanied conditions of approval that are imposed on the application. Because this is conditional zoning, only those conditions agreed to by the applicant can be imposed on them. And so if the applicant wanted to add that condition, we could accept a condition that involved off-site improvement.
Are there any additional questions, or did you have a follow-up question? Commissioner Rains?
Thanks, Chair Fox. A comment and a question. The comment is there's a precedent for striping as a dedicated left and a through right on Fairhill Drive across from Rembert on Glenwood Avenue already. So that's something that maybe the applicant and staff can look at. And then also just a clarification, service F, I understand it is typical for something like this. Can staff or the traffic group identify what, or classify or define in more detail what that means, service F? Thank you.
Sure. This is Jason Myers again with Transportation, and I'm going to look for the exact number that defines the level of service F. It is a function of how long somebody would wait at an intersection compared to not having an intersection there and not having any traffic. And if you were to drive through someplace and there's nobody there and there's no intersection and it takes you a certain amount of time, the level of service is measured as additional time above and beyond that. I believe level of service F is 80 seconds, and I'm hoping that my colleague who's listening can confirm that number for me. But in the case of a signalized intersection at a major corridor like this, where we have many tens of thousands of cars a day on Glenwood Avenue, and around 1,000 or maybe 2,000 cars a day in the side street, the proportion between the two of those is part of the reason it's normal to have a high level or a low level of service on the side street, because NCDOT, as the maintainer of the traffic signal, and generally the city as well, is going to optimize for the average delay of the entire intersection, which means that the level of service of Glenwood and Rembert, even with this growth and with this development, is the level of service C. I'm going to scroll through that section of the TIA to make sure I say that correctly. Level of service, yeah, and in some scenarios B. But that's because Glenwood Avenue experiences a higher level of service and Rembert experiences a much lower level of service and averages out to what's the best, and the best meaning the lowest average delay. That is a bit of a value judgment that traffic engineers have to make of valuing everybody's time equally, and that then puts a bit of a difficulty on the side streets. I do have a confirmation that level of service F is an 80-second delay or greater, which is a minute and 20 seconds or more, which in many cases our cycle lengths on major corridors like this are in the 1.5 to 2 minute total cycle length. Just that's how long you wait if you get there right after the light changes red. Apologize for the rambling answer. I hope that helps answer the question a little bit.
I'd like to see if the applicant has any comment on this subject.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Chair Fox. I did speak with staff about whether or not we could add a condition requiring right-of-way improvements, and was told that no, we could not, because it's off-site and zoning conditions are required to attach to your property. And also that they don't want to have a condition that dictates something in the right-of-way, because that's going to be a city transportation and NCDOT call about what we can and cannot do there. So, you know, there's some lack of clarity on that apparently, but you know, Ms. Reckow and I have discussed that very point. You know, we don't have an objection to agreeing to do what you know staff is going to require in the site plan process, but as you know, that is a process that kind of evolves, and so we have to respond to what's proposed and act accordingly. So.
Are there any additional questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Lampman?
Just to confirm, one of the conditions, however, is to widen Rembert Street based on the parcel. Is that correct?
No, there's not a condition to widen it. It's just, we can't put that condition in, but if that widening is required at site plan, we are agreeing to do that, but we can't put that. It's my understanding we cannot include that as a condition.
Is Jason Myers available to talk about that?
I can answer a part of that question. I think the planning department may need to represent the conversations about what.
I believe we're having an issue with sound. We might have lost Jason there.
Sorry, I apologize for that. I bumped my keyboard and it muted myself. I'll repeat from the start. I will have to defer to the planning department to answer questions about what could or could be offered as a condition. But for this development of this land as a tier 3 site plan would require expanding Rembert Drive into its standard neighborhood street cross section, which is a 64-foot right of way and a 36-foot wide street, only from the center line. That's their requirement. And my guess, looking at IMAPs and measuring things, is that that's about a 7 foot of extra right of way and about 3 or 4 foot of extra street width along the property's frontage. And those are requirements regardless of zoning conditions if there's a tier 3 site plan on this land. I think there's a little bit of confusion about what the actual right of way width is. The plat map shows 60 foot, but the measurements in IMAP show 50 foot. But there's, I think it is probably 50 foot. And maybe Hannah or Ken Bowers or David York can answer questions about the other aspect of that.
So I think David answered the question as to whether it was legally permissible in terms of how that would be structured. I think it would be possible to come up with wording for the condition that would essentially require the applicant at the time of site plan submittal to show this on their plan. That would obviously go through a review process. If for any reason NCDOT or the city were to say, no, you can't do that, then they would not be held to the condition. But I believe it would be possible for us to get wording that would at least that would be something that they would show they were going to do, and it would go through the review process as part of their tier 3 site plan.
Commissioner Miller? And then Commissioner Winters.
If we're going to hold this for 2 weeks until the next planning commission meeting, I might suggest that the question, I had some open questions as well about whether this was permitted to be included as a condition about an off-site condition. So maybe staff and the applicant could clarify that question in time for the applicant to, if they determine that it can be included as a condition, in time for the applicant to get their new condition submitted with the 10-day deadline ahead of the next meeting. So in the next day or two.
Yes, that sounds like a good approach. I did have the conversation with Hannah Reckow. I don't know if she's still on the line, but I don't want it to appear that we weren't, willing to do this, or we didn't do this, but because I did discuss it with her.
Sure, yeah, this is Hannah Reckow. We did discuss with the applicant a condition that they wanted to offer that would direct traffic at the Rembert exit to turn left towards the intersection, and staff requested that they remove that condition.
But we also asked about right-of-way improvements, whether that could be included in the condition. They're not on our site.
I'm not recalling that conversation, but maybe we can, as suggested, have a conversation in the next week. If this case.
Well, we'll sit down again and try to come up with something that works.
I'm trying not to interrupt. This is Danny Howe with Real Engineering. Again, I've done multiple rezonings where we have traffic, right-of-way improvements put into zoning conditions. A lot of times it happens with schools, with improvements required by the TIA, but that's how it's been in the past. If the TIA recommends it, and here we had a TIA with an amendment letter, and then staff recommended it. If we have an amendment to the TIA that says it's required improvement, then it can be put in with, to my understanding, can be then included with the rezoning. And of course, we would want that from the opposite tied into the rezoning to make sure whatever goes in here, if it ends up, because again, this is not just for a daycare. There are other acceptable uses and stuff as part of this rezoning that we need to make sure that these improvements, because again, there's already an existing, traffic. There's existing traffic concerns now before this development. So I think that by tying it to this, it would definitely help the situation if that were to be the case. So again, I know it's been done in the past on multiple rezonings that I've done in Raleigh.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Commissioner Winters, it looked like you had a question.
I did, thank you. We've heard a lot about the rezoning being compatible on Glenwood, but this actually fronts on Rembert. So is this consistent with the development on Rembert? And how will this affect the gateway into the neighborhood?
Can I answer that? This property's address is Glenwood, and the frontage is Glenwood. The city considers the front of this property on Glenwood, not Rembert.
Thank you, Ms. Maddox. Is there any follow-up or any additional questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, Commissioner McIntosh.
I guess I'll just to echo Commissioner Winters' concern. It's strange to me that this is considered an address on Glenwood when the only exit out is going to be onto Rembert. So it doesn't seem like the access is truly on Glenwood, which to me makes it seem like it's a part of Rembert rather than Glenwood.
Okay, thank you for your comment. It looked like from earlier on in the conversation, commissioners might be interested in holding this case to allow some additional review of the TIA. I'm going to allow that. I'll ask for nods or thumbs up. But I would also question if there's an issue of the use, knowing the traffic impact will not change the proposed use. So with that in mind, please give me a hands up or a thumbs up if you'd like to hold this case to review additional traffic information. Okay, seeing everyone is providing me with a hand and a thumbs up, we're going to move on to the next case. Case number E.2, that's Z2720. This is a request to rezone approximately 35 acres of land on Industrial Drive at the I-440 Beltline and Atlantic Avenue from industrial mixed use 3 stories, industrial mixed use 3 stories parking limited with special highway overlay district 2 to commercial mixed use 20 stories conditional use. The overlay district would remain. This property is located in the Midtown Area Plan boundary, and we've heard from the applicant during the Midtown Plan discussions. This request was presented at the February 23rd Planning Commission meeting. We heard a staff and applicant presentation. The applicant has revised the request based on that previous discussion. I would ask for a brief update with a focus on changes to the request. John Anagnos will provide a staff update.
Thank you. Can we advance 2 slides, please? Okay, so just a quick reminder about the site and its location. It is about 35 acres near the intersection of Wake Forest Road and Six Forks Road, just south of I-440, and is a considerable amount of retail development in the area. And currently the site is used for warehouse and distribution primarily, with some office uses, as well as a Raleigh Police Department vehicle storage and maintenance facility. Can we advance to the condition slide, please? So last time you saw this case, there was a zoning condition that required many of the standards of the urban limited frontage for Industrial Drive, but did not apply frontage requirements to the rest of the site. The applicant has revised the zoning conditions to apply the urban limited frontage standards essentially to the entire site. There is one exemption that they have included in the way they've structured these conditions, which is on the north side of Front Street, which is where there's the narrow portion of their property between Front Street and I-440. They have written this condition to exempt them from wrapping parking structures with active uses. So normally in an urban frontage, the exterior of a parking structure where it faces the street has to have some finished space with a retail or some other active use present along the street. So they have given themselves relief from that, but otherwise the site in its entirety would meet urban limited frontage standards. And that has put them consistent with the urban form map and a couple of other policies related to frontage and urban design. The other change since the last time you saw this case is condition number 4. So that's a summary that you see there. What they had initially submitted to staff was an additional sentence to condition number 4, which said that uses that aren't listed in that condition would not or are still allowed on the site, but did not provide for how those uses would be limited in terms of square footage or units. And so what that did was cause an issue where without a control on those other unlisted uses, the assumption that staff has to make is that there could be a significant amount of additional development beyond what those caps say in that condition. And that would lead to their traffic impact analysis no longer being accurate. Since that initial submission, we have gotten some technical revisions from the applicant clarifying the intent of the condition, which is that there are other unlisted uses basically that are allowed on the site, but any development of those other uses would count against these totals here, such that the traffic generation would be the same regardless of the uses selected. And so that has resolved the issues with the TIA. And at this time, that condition is acceptable to staff, and in this case has no outstanding issues related to that condition. And so with that, I'd like to advance to the policy analysis slide, the second policy analysis slide. And so just a quick note that some of these policies that were inconsistent are now consistent, things like frontage and the design guidelines. And so that's the changes that have occurred since you last saw this case, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Anagnos. We've previously heard from the applicant. Are there any questions of the applicant? I believe Matt Paul is available to answer questions. There is no member from the public signed up to speak on this case. Okay, pulling to the table. Do any commissioners have any comments or questions they'd like to ask? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Miller?
I move to approve case Z2720. This case is overall consistent with the comprehensive plan, in particular policy LU 1.3, conditional use district consistency, policy LU 4.4, reducing vehicle miles traveled, policy LU 7.1, encouraging nodal development, and policy MT 12, Midtown Height, and policy MT 15, Midtown Waterfront District.
Thank you for your motion. I neglected to mention as well, Commissioner Rain's recusal still stands on this issue. Do I have a second on the motion? Commissioner Mann?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion and the second. I will ask Chinitha for a roll call of the members to record their individual votes. At the end of the roll call, I will announce the outcome of the vote.
Chair Fox, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman?
Aye.
Commissioner Mann?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
And Vice Chair Winters?
Aye.
The motion passes 6-0. Okay, that concludes all of the discussion items on our agenda. Next is approval of the minutes. I would like to entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes. Commissioner Lampman?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner McIntosh?
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? I missed the meeting minutes in the
There were no minutes.
Apologies, the script is incorrect.
Yeah, this is for the special meeting. There were no minutes.
Excellent, thank you. Holding that, do any commissioners have a report? And I'd like to include also text change committee, strategic planning committee, or transportation committee if we have any meetings or any topics we'd like to let the public know about. Commissioner May?
Commissioner Fox, I think we have a special text change committee meeting on the 6th. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have a text change committee meeting on the 6th, a special meeting.
Okay, looking at the head nod from Mr. York, it looks like that is accurate. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Okay, will there be a monthly meeting for strategic planning? Vice Chair Winters?
Yes, there will be. I'm sorry, I don't have the date in front of me, but it's the third Tuesday.
All right,
starting-
excellent. All right.
I'm sorry, one more.
Yes, ma'am.
I heard from Commissioner, I'm sorry, Beckett. Bennett, I'm sorry. Bob. There will be no transportation committee meeting this month.
Excellent, thank you for that. Next is a report of the Deputy Planning Director, Mr. Bowers.
No formal report because this special meeting has occurred. There's been no updates from council since there's been no council meeting since I last gave you a report. I will just note verbally, though, that we've posted 2 very significant text changes to our public input portal as of late last week. There are TC 520, which addresses missing middle housing, and TC 1720, which is revisions to the transit overlay district. And they'll be coming your way after that initial round of public input is done. But if you want to get a head start at, or a preview of what's in them, you can look at them now.
Thank you for that. All right, are there any other comments for the good of the order? Seeing none, that concludes this meeting of the Planning Commission. Thank you, everybody.